Ever stared at your favorite French fries and thought about international politics? Probably not. But what if those fries became a pawn in a global economic chess match? Imagine a world where Canada, pushed to the brink, decides to slam the potato door shut on the United States. While one world power fumes, another is across the ocean, signing billion-dollar deals with growing Asian economies. This isn't just a story about a vegetable. It's a look at economic sovereignty, the shifting sands of global power, and what happens when a nation decides to write its own rules. The Spark, a hypothetical crisis built on real tensions. To see how a potato war could ignite, you first have to understand that the Canada-US trade relationship, while massive, has always had friction. The two nations have bickered over everything from lumber to dairy for generations. These disagreements are often political, flaring up with a new administration or a change in economic winds. Now let's set the stage for our hypothetical crisis. Imagine a future U.S. administration reviving a protectionist spirit imposes a sudden, blanket 35% tariff on all Canadian potato imports. No warning, no talks, just a policy earthquake. Why would this be such a big deal? Because the Canada-US potato trade is a deeply integrated machine. In the 2023 to 2024 crop year, the U.S. market accounted for a staggering 93% of Canada's fresh potato exports and 91% of its French fry exports. The total value of all Canadian potato exports was over $3.6 billion. These aren't just numbers. They represent a core piece of the American food system, supplying everything from fast food giants to grocery stores. A hypothetical tariff like this wouldn't just be a line on a customs form. It would be a wrench in the gears. A standard 25-ton truck of frozen fries would suddenly have thousands of dollars in extra taxes tacked on. For American importers, that's not a cost they can just eat. It's a cost that gets passed down to consumers, and fast. We've seen previews of this in real life. In late 2021, after the discovery of potato wart in a few PEI fields, the Canadian government suspended shipments to the U.S. to prevent a full-on, long-term ban from American authorities. It was a stark reminder of how quickly the tap can be turned off and how farming can become a political football. This history shows that a major trade dispute over potatoes isn't just a wild hypothetical, it's a crisis waiting for a spark. In our scenario, a 35% potato tariff wouldn't land quietly. It would be amplified by a political firestorm, likely led by a familiar voice. Even out of office, Donald Trump's brand of populist protectionism remains a powerful force. Imagine the all-caps social media posts about unfair Canadian potatoes, and rally speeches framing the tariff as simply putting America first. The narrative would likely paint Canadian farmers as a foreign threat, conveniently ignoring that some of the biggest Canadian players like McCain Foods are also massive employers in the United States, running plants in states like Idaho, Wisconsin, and Maine. The story sold to the public would be simple, powerful, and designed to stir things up. But behind the political noise, the real pain would be economic, hitting both sides of the border. In the U.S., the first to feel it would be consumers. A 50-pound bag of potatoes, a staple for families and restaurants, could hypothetically jump in price. That side of fries at your local diner? The price might go up and the portion might shrink. Diners might even notice a dip in quality as restaurants scramble to replace high-grade Canadian spuds with whatever domestic options they can get their hands on. American businesses would be in chaos. Food processors, who depend on a steady, predictable flow of Canadian potatoes, would see their supply chains disrupted and costs skyrocket, forcing them to either raise prices or watch their profits vanish. North of the border, the impact would be a gut punch. Potato farmers in Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Alberta have built their businesses for generations around the American market. A sudden 35% tariff would be catastrophic. Contracts would be voided. Warehouses full of potatoes would sit idle. Farmers would face the heartbreaking choice of letting their crops rot because their main customer just vanished overnight. This is the agitation, a crisis causing real tangible pain and setting the stage for a dramatic response. We're untangling a complex web of trade and politics that has very real consequences for your wallet. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, do me a favor and hit that like button. It's a small click that makes a huge difference and lets us keep digging into these critical stories. The solution: Canada's calculated pivot to Asia. Facing a slammed door in the U.S., what does Canada do in this scenario? It doesn't just get mad, it gets strategic. The solution isn't a loud, angry trade war. It's a quiet, calculated pivot, a move built on years of careful planning. Enter the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP. Canada ratified this free trade deal in late 2018, connecting it to a bloc of 10 other Asia-Pacific nations and a market of nearly 500 million people. While the U.S. famously backed out of the CPTPP's predecessor, Canada stayed in, gaining a critical head start. This trade deal is Canada's secret weapon. It gives Canadian products, including agricultural goods, preferential access and lower tariffs in fast-growing markets like Japan and Vietnam. So, as the hypothetical U.S. tariff wall goes up, Canada already has other doors opening. Canadian frozen fries, for example, could enter Vietnam with a much lower tariff than American competitors, making them cheaper and more attractive. This is where a figure like Mark Carney fits into the story. To be clear, Carney isn't a trade minister signing deals. As a world-renowned economist who has led the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, he represents the strategic, big-picture thinking of Team Canada. His role is symbolic. He embodies the sophisticated global mindset that positions Canada to handle these shocks. His voice would be one of calm, strategic confidence, a stark contrast to the fiery rhetoric from the South. The billion-dollar deal with Asia isn't a single document. It's a wave of new and expanded contracts made possible by the CPTPP. It's Canadian potato processors seeing the U.S. market shrink, aggressively chasing new buyers in Tokyo and beyond. It's trade delegations heading to Southeast Asia, where a rising middle class has a growing appetite for foods like French fries. The real-world groundwork is already there. In late 2024, Canada and Indonesia concluded negotiations for a Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, CEPA, with a commitment to sign it in 2025. This deal is set to eventually reduce or eliminate tariffs on over 95% of Canadian exports to a market of nearly 300 million people. In 2023, Indonesia was already a destination for over $7 million in Canadian potato exports. This isn't just about replacing lost sales to the U.S., it's about building a more resilient and diversified export strategy for the future. The broader implications: a new economic world order. Zooming out, this hypothetical potato war tells a much bigger story about the changing nature of global trade. For decades, the world ran on the assumption that deeper economic integration was the only way forward. The Canada-U.S. relationship was the textbook example. But this crisis highlights the incredible risk of dependency. When a huge majority of a key export like potatoes is tied to a single trading partner, your economy is vulnerable to that partner's political whims. The lesson is clear. In an unpredictable world, diversification is survival. Canada's strategic pivot to Asia becomes a powerful playbook for other middle power nations. It shows how to use smart multilateral trade deals as a defense against the unilateral actions of giants. While the U.S. in our scenario swings the hammer of tariffs, Canada responds with the scalpel of strategic agreements. It's a shift from a north-south trade axis dominated by the U.S. to an east-west strategy that embraces the rest of the world. This story presents a clash of two very different economic philosophies. On one side, you have a protectionist model that tries to wall off the domestic economy, but often ends up raising prices for its own consumers and disrupting its own businesses. On the other, you have Canada's multilateral approach, a strategy that embraces global markets, builds alliances, and creates a more resilient economy by having more options. In our thought experiment, the Canadian strategy proves smarter in the long run. While the U.S. deals with price shocks and supply chain headaches, Canada is forging new partnerships and building a more robust economic future. The broader implication is a potential reordering of economic power, suggesting that in the new global economy, agility and strategic alliances might just be more powerful than sheer size. The humble potato becomes a symbol of a nation taking control of its own destiny. We started with a hypothetical trade war over a simple potato. We saw how it could unleash political fury and inflict real economic pain on both sides of the border. But most importantly, we explored a strategic, forward-thinking solution. Not a tit-for-tat fight, but a quiet, decisive pivot to new markets. Canada's turn to Asia, supported by years of diplomatic groundwork, with agreements like the CPTPP and the new CPA with Indonesia, is more than just a search for new customers. It represents a fundamental rethinking of its place in the world, a move from dependency toward independence, from junior partner to savvy global player. This story, while centered on a hypothetical potato conflict, offers a glimpse into a future where nations that build bridges may find themselves on much firmer ground than those that build walls. But what do you think? Is this scenario a realistic look at the future of trade, where strategic diversification is the only way to win? Or is the North American economy just too intertwined to be broken up by a single dispute? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one.